Well, hello and welcome to the Tight Five Live. A little slow start there, but Ben Kimber here, and with me today is, as a sub, we've lost Morgan Turanui, but in his place we've got the great man, Andrew Swain. How are you, Swainy?
Good to see you, Benny. Yep, great to be off the pine. This is where I make my impact. Normally, the last 20 minutes, come on, impact player, bring it on. Let's go.
That's it, mate. And look, and Morgs, of course, he's very much a Randwick backs man. We might get some broader opinion from you today, mate. We might hear about the forwards and stuff, a little bit of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. It is called the Tight Five after all. I'm glad that you've actually finally got someone who's played in the Tight Five on the Tight Five.
Well, mate, we've got a very special guest that I'm going to bring in a second who's not a Tight Five man, but we'll hear from him. But before we do, I just wanted to say what a fantastic weekend it was in Australian rugby and New Zealand rugby. Not much rugby going on around the world, but all the games we saw this weekend, we're seeing tight games. I thought the Tars lifted. And what I wanted to say was to those of you out there who agree with me, tap those mates who haven't been watching, who've turned rugby off in the past, because right now they'll appreciate it. Rugby was looking great this weekend. Both games went fantastically well, went down to the wire. We saw some really good footy, really entertaining footy. Surely you're on the same page there, Swain.
I could not agree more, Benny. It was fantastic to watch. Friday night, across the weekend. So you got Friday night, the Aussie game was brilliant. You had two back-to-back brilliant games yesterday, and then today's game was probably the best of the lot over there. The Chiefs Highlanders game, but still. Great to see the standard of the Aussie game lift a little bit as well. That they were very competitive. I thought the skill level and the speed of the game was certainly improved from the previous 2 weeks. So, mate, I'm absolutely on the same page as you there. And I think you're right. If you're a rugby fan out there, you've definitely got to get on board and tap your mates to start watching as well. And, gee, wouldn't it be good to have a nice little trans-Tasman comp maybe next year? Maybe.
It would, mate. I can tell because some of the mates who haven't been watching as much the last couple of years are back in the WhatsApp groups talking to me about it, so I can tell it's bringing them back. Now, a guy who, if he was playing, would bring the fans back to the game, I know. It's a shame we're not seeing him on the field at the moment, but he's reached that point of his career. He's moved on. Let's bring him in, the great man, Will Genia. Will, how are you, buddy?
Good, mate. I'm really good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great to see you, Willie. Mate, last time I saw you, we just got off a plane in Tokyo, and you were on your way to the end-of-season function at Kintetsu there, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, mate, it was. It is good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I was well and truly finished up with the Wallabies and heading over to, I guess, start that new adventure with Kintetsu.
Now, Will, mate, for a bloke who famously sported a number of different hairdos through the career, mate, have you got anything going under that hat for the lockdown? Any lockdown specials?
No, mate, just real sort of short on the sides at the back and a little bit on the top. Just trying to look more like a dad now as opposed to carrying on a bit.
Mate, no COVID haircut from you. I'm very surprised because there's a few good ones out there in the rugby world at the moment.
Yeah. Mate, I was thinking about going blonde, but I'd done that already. It probably didn't suit me that much, so I thought I'd try to look a little bit more like a dad.
Just be happy that you can, mate. Just be happy that you can, all right? Just be happy that you can.
Mate, but I don't know what Joe Lance is doing. I think he's dyeing his hair blonde to match his scalp because obviously he's balding pretty badly.
it's camouflage, mate. It's camouflage.
Yeah,
now, look,
big camouflage.
Will needs no introduction, guys, but of course 114 games for the Reds, including a title there, 23 for the Rebels, 110 Wallabies caps. He started his last game at 9 for the Wallabies at the World Cup last year. It's great to have him on the show. Let's have a look at what we're going to go through today, guys. These are the 5 things we want to cover. We want to talk about the player of the round, and we'll do a bit of talk about the games on the weekend in that. A play of the round. We're going to look at the 9 and 10 contenders. And I was really pleased to get Will on to have a chat about this because we're a few rounds in now. And really, to me, it's wide open for that 9-10 jersey. And with Will's expertise, we'll have a talk about how those guys are going. We've got to talk trans-Tasman comp as well. We've seen the New Zealanders come out with a plan that inviting Australia in. There's a lot going on there. We'll talk about that. And then finally, rule changes, because we've had some rule changes. There's a few there. And we saw today also Eddie Jones's call to World Rugby to think about the number of substitutions is always being talked about. So I want to get into that as well. But look, guys, let's get moving on player of the round. 2 tight games. Waratahs looked like they were going to win it there for a little while. Brumbies came home and got that. 4 again, you've got to be appreciating the way this Western Force team have come into this competition. But let's have a look. If I can just bring up this screen. 2 games. So Reds 31, Force 24. Now, Will, we've picked out 3 players in each game to talk through. I'll get your thoughts on these in a second. But Swaney, that Reds Force game, the Force went out to a 14-0 lead. The Reds came back in it, but the Force, I thought they might get blown out of the water. They kept on there tenaciously and almost got there.
Yeah, they just hang tough, don't they? And this is the signs of a team that have probably been together for a few years. There are a few new faces scattered through that team, but the good chunk of that squad know each other pretty well through playing rapid rugby together. So it was great to watch. A young bloke, Byron Ralston, in the middle there. I thought he was brilliant. 2 tries. Kept his width beautifully in that first try with the little chip over the top from John O'Lance, and then the intercept. He read it beautifully out of the hands of James O'Connor, and he held off Filippo Daungunu, who is absolutely breakneck speed, to hold him off and run 90 metres to score the try. I thought it was very impressive.
Yeah, so look, the 3 guys from that game that we want to talk about, Tania Latupo. Now, Tania Latupo just seems to be building. I'm going to ask Will about him in a second, but he had 90 minutes in the Super game, the Super Time game. He had another long effort here, and he keeps putting in. And finally, Tate McDermott. We're going to talk to Will about the 9s, but Tate McDermott, to me, probably came off a little bit early. Will, what did you think of Tate McDermott, and particularly that he seems to be coming off a bit sooner in games than I would have expected from Brad Thorne?
Yeah, I think he's been excellent. I think he's been the Form 9 of the competition thus far. I think he does the basics very well. His service has improved a hell of a lot, and I think what he brings to the game is just speed and energy. I think you saw that when they played the Waratahs. Bit of heads-up footy, bit of speed, that quick tap to score that try, and I think that speed and that energy is what sets off their attack and allows them to play, I guess, the way that they're playing. And I think as far as the substitution, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a bit of a strange one as well, but I think what Brad's trying to breed there is a culture where it doesn't matter who you are or your name or whether you're being talked about as a Wallaby. I think he just trusts his players to go in and do a job. And I think the fact that he's subbing someone out who's so influential and bringing another half back in I think he further wants to breed that culture by doing things like that.
So do you think that's, when you've got a guy like Tate McDermott, though, who's proving so influential on the games, he's a real core part of that game for the Reds. And one of the things I really noticed about him, and this is what you see with all good 9s, is the amount of ground they cover. A 9 plays in so many different ways across the field, cover defence, keeping those eyes up, making sure they're everywhere. Is that a good thing that you take such an influential guy off the field in a game, even though you've got that longer term view?
Well, the thing is, I probably wouldn't. I mean, in my time when I was playing, I always enjoyed playing the 80 minutes, and I actually always enjoyed the back 20 minutes of the game, because as a halfback, you start to see the defence is tiring. You start to see that space starts to open up in and around the ruck or in the backfield and things like that. So for me, I'm not a big fan of it. And I guess over the course of my career, I probably tended to play 70, 80 minutes majority of the time. So the thing that can be frustrating as well for someone like Tate is if he's playing really well and he's feeling that he's having an influence on the game, that can be a little bit detrimental, I guess, to his confidence as well. But so yeah, for me, it's probably not something that I wholeheartedly agree with, but I guess I can see the benefits of it in terms of the overall scheme as far as the culture and the team.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about the 9s and 10s in particular in a minute. I just want to talk now about Tania Latupo. As I said, he's really getting that full fitness under him. He seems to be bigger and stronger and willing to go further, or able to go further in a game. How do you stop a bloke like Tania Latupo? Look at this try that he scored. So the Reds right on the line here, the ball just shifts. And when you've got a guy with his size and strength this close to the line, well, it's got to be a ridiculously hard man to pull up.
Mate, it's almost impossible to stop him. I think that when I first met him, he obviously had the X factor ability in terms of his speed, the ground he covers, and he was actually surprisingly very fit when I first met him. So, but the thing that I think that he had to realize, and I think now he's starting to understand his capabilities, is it's about doing the little things very well. It's about, as a prop, making sure you scrummage well. It's about, as a prop, making sure you're working hard in defense to fill in the space in and around the ruck, making your tackles, and then the X factor stuff flows off the back of those sorts of things. And I think the most impressive thing I've found about his performances is he's doing it for 80 minutes. He's doing all those things incredibly well for 80 minutes. And for a big guy who can have, and who can have an incredible impact on a game over the course of 80 minutes as opposed to maybe 50 or 60. It's amazing the things that he's doing.
Well, he feels like a guy who is just everyone feeds off his enthusiasm, even on the training paddock. You watch his Instagram stories, you watch him on the field though as well. He's always he's always creating laughter, and actually there was that big hit yesterday as well that he put on Friday night where he actually worked on the inside. Just shows his work ethic as well.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an amazing guy because he's always so positive, always smiling, always having a laugh, and kind of guy you just like being around all the time because he brings out that positivity in you. And they're the sorts of people you love being on the field with. That no matter what the situation is, they're always positive. They're always got a smile on their face and they're loving, they're doing the hard yards. And I think that particular play probably shows that he's putting in the effort to do those little things well, as opposed to just worrying about the big hit or the big run. Goes in and around the ruck inside and makes that tackle.
The other guy to mention here, guys, we saw McDermott and Tupou both stand out in that game. I think Brian Ralston, young bloke on the wing for the Force, scored a couple of tries, took an intercept, scored another one off a nice little play with Jono West chipped through with the advantage. Just worth calling out because he's putting his hand up, and this is what we wanted to see from these Force guys, isn't it, Swaney?
Yeah, absolutely. A young guy, all these young guys in this competition are, starting to put their hands up. But in particular, Byron Ralston, that's 3 tries in 2 games for him. He's from the Brothers Club in Brisbane, a Brothers product, and as are a lot of the Queensland Reds guys. So it was great to watch. But yeah, if you have a look here, he just holds his width beautifully, I think, and stays in that tram track. Well, would you agree?
I don't think Will heard you there, mate, but he was just talking about the width. Yeah, just talking about the width that Ralston held there. That as a winger.
The easy thing there would be to just chase in, and you obviously then compress all your players within a small part of the field. But the fact that he holds his width allows them to then spread the ball across the field to where there is space. So great awareness and good understanding of where that space actually was.
Yeah, he looks like a genuine finisher as well. There are a couple of those across the competition, but it's great to see the Western Force have got one in their ranks.
Absolutely. Guys, look, let's just talk about the other game now. Waratahs 23, Brumbies 24. The Waratahs blew me away here. I honestly expected them to get a touch-up. I thought that their scrum might be under pressure. I actually called out on Twitter. I said, I've got to probably apologise to their scrum. I said, Tom Robertson coming in, not quite fresh. Harry Johnson-Holmes, a new tight head, a light hooker, and in his first game, Tom Horton, and I've been giving it to Ned Hannigan in the second row. But look, they all turned up. 3 guys to call out here. Cusack, I think number 7 for the Brumbies, keeps playing well every week. Rob Simmons, I thought had a fantastic game, second rower there, and we'll talk more about him in a second. And Tom Horton, for a bloke who's come into the side, really turned up, I think, and showed that. If you train well and get into a side, well, there's a couple of plays there, including the try he scored, where he worked so well with others, Swaney.
Yeah, that's right. Loved watching Tom Horton do well, a guy who's come from the Sydney University club, and he's earned his spot in that team. And you're right, he just did the little effort areas. I wrote a story on foxsports.com.au about the guys that caught my eye over the weekend, and he was definitely one of them. He just, for his try, sat off the back of Mitch Short, who was under pressure, and then he sliced right through the middle of and he's a guy who seems very mobile, and he was quite abrasive when he got into those little tight areas as well. So really really great to see a young bloke like Tom Horton actually have a red hot crack and actually take his opportunity when it's presented to him.
Will, were you surprised by that result? The Brumbies have been dominant, I suppose, the last couple of years, particularly over the Waratahs, and the Tars had it right up till the 77th minute.
Mate, if I'm being honest, I was incredibly surprised. I thought it was going to be a touch-up. But I think what it does speak to is it speaks to the importance of the rivalry and the derbies that we have, because it's purely just an Australian-based competition at the moment. Obviously, there's a rich tradition in history, and the Tars they would have rocked up so incredibly fired up for the game. And as you said, Swaney, all the young players then step up and start playing well, starting to express themselves. And yeah, look, I was incredibly surprised, but what a game. What a way to finish right at the end. Isaac Fine scoring that try pretty much right on
Mate, funny you should say that. I've just teed that up. Let's watch it here. For a halfback, for a scrum half, Will, beautiful. Just drifts across and just a little bit of gas there.
Right, he's actually, I've watched him for a long time now. He's actually a very, very good player, and he's one of his strengths has always been his running game. So the thing I like about it is it seems like something else must have been called, but he just gets the ball, he runs out and looks for space and manages to find that gap. So it was great to watch, and a little bit, if you watch it here, he's getting out, looking for space, looking for runners, and then just spots it and just accelerates and takes off. Great try, great way to win it right at the end.
Yeah, he's a product of Brisbane Premier Rugby there, and one of the commentators in Brisbane Premier Rugby described him last year as smoother than a wet frog's armpit. So that's a fair description for someone like Isaac Fines, and that was actually spot on in that little set play as well.
Nice little, exactly what a scrum half would look for too, mate. Two of those big boys not quite watching their defensive line as they should be, slightly out of step, and he took it beautifully. And actually, I think we're going to talk 9s and 10s in a minute, and I think one of the really fantastic things about the Super Rugby AU competition that we're going to see is the depth. There's guys probably that we should be talking about who aren't starting, but are starting to show themselves on the bench, and he's a guy who's an ex-Western Force player, I think, who's one to keep an eye on. Look, now in the absence of Morgs, I got to pick the player of the round, and I just wanted to highlight that I think it was this man. Now, I admit the Waratahs lost, but the manner in which they almost took the game showed a massive change. And I'm calling out Rob Simmons here because that, to me, was the best 80-minute effort I have seen from him, the best game I've seen from him in a couple of years, I think. He was absolutely in everything. And right now in Australian rugby, we're talking about a lack of second rowers. We've lost a couple of guys overseas. It's an area that there's probably of concern. Rob Simmons is going to have to step up. He's the veteran. But he didn't only just step up in this game in one way. He controlled a line-out that destroyed the Brumbies line-out. He was 70th minute, 77th minute. He was still making runs out wide. The last couple of big hits in the game trying to turn the ball over were from this guy. And particularly, I think, because it's such a young team and he was an unexpected captain. Michael Hooper wasn't really expected to step down, and he did. So there was a lot of things, I think, involved in that game for Rob Simmons. Swaney, as a second rower yourself, mate, I thought it was a great performance.
Yeah, look, I really liked the way that Rob last night, was making all of his tackles. Occasionally you'd had seen him slip off a couple over the last couple of years. He made them all last night. The other thing that I really enjoyed seeing was the hurt after the game from him. It really meant something to him. And this competition actually across the board, you've seen that these games, these derbies, actually mean something to these guys. And so, and Rob was pretty gutted after the game, you'd have to say, and quite rightly, they just got done at the death. But it was, it was something. It was really interesting to see how much that actually really hurt him.
Yeah. Rob Simmons seems like a very quietly spoken guy. Will, was he the sort of guy who was more, putting it on the park than talking about it?
I think he's been, in all the time that I've known him, he's probably been a guy who just leads by example. And I think the reason I think he's performing really well and played exceptionally well last night is just, I think leadership suits him. And I think particularly in that environment at the Waratahs, being a senior player, he understands that he has to set the standard. He has to be playing well. He has to be making his tackles. He has to be carrying the ball well and controlling the lineout. So I think that role sits really well with him. And I think it's allowed him to express himself freely and just play. And really set the standard for that young team.
I think the other guy that was worth noticing out of that game too, the Brumbies bench in particular came on and controlled that game, and the way they finished it off to set up that Isaac Fines try. But Michael Hooper thought he might have turned the ball over late. He left the field straight away afterwards. He looked quite angry and quite upset. Went up the shed, up into the sheds, and sat there fuming. Is he a guy who gets the anger on when he's not winning, mate? Probably a silly question.
Hoops. Mate, he can control his emotions pretty well. Like, you can tell when he's filthy about something, but I think that's one of his strengths as a leader as well. He tends to control his emotions really well and understands what to say, when to say it. I think that's one of his greatest strengths. And yeah, I can tell he was definitely filthy, but I will say this, the one thing I really admire about the Brumbies and the way they play the game is their work around the breakdown. It's just so immense. It's physical. they love the contact, and they make sure that when they clean someone out, they make it hurt, and they allow themselves to have good clean ball.
Absolutely. Guys, look, I'm going to cop some stick because I've given the player of the round to a Waratah, and I'm going to give the play of the round to the Waratahs as well. So I look forward to the comments on that
Benny. They lost, mate. Come on.
They did. But look, there's reasons. I've always got reasons, Swaney. Let's just have a look at this play here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Will. But this was the Waratahs try where they caught the Brumbies napping. They had the extra man. I think Muirhead was in the bin. And this fast play, Harrison there's got the ball on the left. He takes a quick tap. Ram is way out on the wing, ready to go. And I think Joey Ralston in the centre was calling for it to go, but Ram out there right on the edge. Beautiful crossfield kick, popped it up, try. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this one was because in Australian rugby, we're talking about young guys coming through. We're talking about wanting confidence. We're talking about wanting to see them perform. And I absolutely love to see heads-up rugby. Will, would this have been something that have talked about, or do you think this would have been something that the guys have just spotted and said, let's go?
But I think, in my experience, whenever you get a penalty as a halfback or a 5'8", you always expect your wingers to hold the width for opportunities like that. So maybe it was a call, maybe it wasn't. But yeah, as I said, in my time, it was always expected that you always presented that opportunity for your 9s or 10s to hit that cross kick. But the thing that I like the most about it is just a young bloke being out there expressing himself and backing himself, having the confidence to hit that kick. And the best thing about it is the fact that it's come off. You know, that's just more positive reinforcement to him to realize I can just do this. I can back myself. I can play what I see and trust that I've got the skills to execute it. So I completely agree that should be play of the round, and I loved it. Great heads up footy.
But I tell you what, you can tell he's a young guy because he's got a lot of faith in that really dodgy mustache that he's growing. I mean, it's only when you're about 20 that you think you've got a mustache when you don't really have one. And as a bloke who grows an awful one, I know exactly what that's like. So kudos to Will for sticking with that. Look, that's going to roll us into the next item on our agenda. And we wanted to go through and get Will to talk to us about some of the guys that are in the 9 and the 10 jersey. Now, clearly, Will hung up the boots internationally last year, heading over to Japan. We might ask him about the Giddo law later on, though, and see if he'd still play for us. But we also we want to know who's likely to step in there. And you'd have to say also that the 10 jersey, that there's an opportunity there. Of course, Matt Toomua played there last year, but Bernard Foley has moved on and said he's not available. So 9 and 10, a new Wallabies coach. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. Let's talk about then the 9 and 10 contenders. Hang on, I'll just get up the screen. And we might talk through each of these guys and sort of see how you think they're going. So 5 sets here, halves and 5/8. As I said, there's a couple of guys we might mention. First up, Will, Brumbies. Joe Powell, Noah Lolosio. How do you think they've been going?
I think they've been going really well. You know, granted, they are sitting behind a forward pack that's a lot of the times going forward and giving them a good clean ball, but at the end of the day, you've still got to perform your roles. And the one thing I really like about Joey is he's very quick to the breakdown. He's got an exceptional pass, and he's sort of grown into himself more as a player. You can see that he's demanding things from his teammates, his forwards in front of him, his backs, and demanding that sort of control. And I think Noah's been exceptional. You know, as a young kid coming in to be able to perform the way that he has, just speaks to. I heard the coach Dan McKellar saying that he's very grounded. He doesn't get too far ahead of himself, and no situation phases him. And just watching him, you know, that's certainly something that you can see stands out. And you know, for me, that's a huge sort of trait and attribute that you want in someone who's going to eventually play Test rugby. You want to be able to trust that the moment isn't too big for him.
Well, Joey Powell's been around for a few years now, and he's been in and around the Wallabies squad for quite a few years. How important is it for Noah Lolosio to have someone like Joe Powell inside feeding him week in, week out?
It's massive. Like it's huge. As a young 10, you want either experience on the inside of you or the outside of you, because then you can then rely on them in tough situations to shoulder more of the responsibility in terms of the running of the game. And I think he's very fortunate that inside him he's got Joey, and then outside him he's got guys like Tevita, Tom Banks, guys with experience who have played Test match rugby who allow him to be a little bit more comfortable to maybe rely on them a little bit more, if that makes sense, so that he can just do the simple things and do his job
And one more from me. What is it that Joe needs to do to take his game to the next level? Because he's a guy who, again, as I said, he's just about crack test rugby, but he hasn't been there consistently.
Look, I think he's probably been one of the better nines in the competition. Tate, just like I said, I think it's just being ruthless and demanding what it is that you want from your teammates, and not because a lot of the times you can be a bit passive and sort of just let things go. But as a halfback, you've got to be really demanding of communication from your fullback, laying down the expectations of what you want from your forwards. And I think you can see in his game, he's certainly grown in that space as far as a leader and driving those expectations. And I think I'd like to see him get given an opportunity because I've always thought of him as a very, very good player.
Guys, we might not do team by team here because I think we'll run out of time. But just looking across this scope here, we've got Ian Pryor, John O'Lance there, Ryan Lowrens, Matt Toomua, a very dodgy hairstyle there on Tate McDermott with James O'Connor, and of course Mitch Short and Will Harrison at the Tars. Will, who stands out amongst this bunch as is playing well, and what do you think in terms of 9 and 10 contenders at the moment leading the pack?
Mate, I think for me the best 9 of the competition thus far would have to be Tate. I love the way he plays the game. I think he's just he brings this energy and this presence on the field where you just never know what he's going to do. He's got an exceptional running game where he attacks the fringe defenders around the ruck, but then he's worked on his pass to be able to make sure he can, when he gets out to either play the short runners, then play the 10 out the back. When you have a player like that, it's hard to defend because you don't know what he's going to do. And he reminds me a little bit of Fuff in the sense that he's like an Energizer bunny. He's just always moving, always doing something. Loves the contact, loves getting involved in the physical side of things as well. And I think that his game just translates very well into the test arena. So for me, I think he's certainly the guy who's leading the way from a halfback perspective. And I'd probably say in terms of the 10, I'd probably say Noah. I mean, it's unfortunate that he's injured. But I like what he's been doing. I like the fact that he's not someone who gets overawed by the situation or the moment within games. He does the simple things really well. And I'd probably love to see him have an opportunity. I mean, you've got Matt Toomua, who's obviously been playing well, and he's been around for a long time. But my feelings about Matty is I probably think he's more a 12 than he is a 10. He's got all the attributes to be a world-class 12 in the sense that he's a big body, he's a great defender. Makes his tackles. He runs good lines and he runs hard because he's that big body. But then he's got the added bonus of having great ball skills and a great kick on him as well. So, it's an interesting one because as a 12, you're either, more often than not, you're either one or the other. You're a ball playing 12, like, say, for example, a Matt Giddo, or you're like a Manu Tuilangi where you're just a big guy who runs, exceptional lines and is hard to tackle. Matty's sort of blessed with the best of both, which I think separates him and, for me, probably cements him as the Wallaby number 12. I'd love to see him have that number 12 jersey.
Yeah, that's interesting, mate, because I think on this show with Morgs a lot, we talk about players and their best positions. I probably feel that way about James O'Connor as well. He feels to me like a very good footballer spending time there at 10, but perhaps not his best position.
Yeah, I probably agree as well. I mean, I think of necessity because they obviously don't have someone who can do the job as well as he can. And granted, he has been playing really good rugby. But having had experience with James, I played with him as the 10 during the Lions series and played with him a lot. His greatest strength is his running ability. You think back to when he first came into the scene, and he's not exactly lost any pace or anything like that. Maybe just a touch, but his footwork in contact, his strength in contact, his ability around that area to run good lines and run the ball is exceptional. I think it's probably what's given him success wearing the 10 jersey. The fact that when he runs and puts pace on the ball, he makes people sit, which then allows him to play people into space around him. But I just think he's not an out-and-out 10. I think he's probably a fullback at this stage of his career. Someone who has that running ability, who's good under the high ball, who can kick, and who can probably ball play a little bit every now and then, stepping in there as the phases sort of roll on.
All those guys, with the exception of Toomua, are quite young. What about Pryor and Lance? I mean, it's going to take a brave Wallabies coach to pick a Western Force player this year, but they're playing pretty well.
They're playing really well. It's interesting. I was with Ian Pryor was at the Reds when we won the competition in 2011, and he was always a very, very good player as well. So it's amazing and great to see him having an opportunity at the Force and leading them very, very well. Yeah, I mean, look, they are a little bit older, but I just think at the start of the World Cup cycle now with a completely new coaching setup, I think it's an opportunity for them to start fresh. And these young guys are not only now playing consistently week in, week out, they're actually playing well. So I think it's important to, give them the opportunity to see if they can play at that next level. And, from my experience, I remember when I first played for the Wallabies when I was 21, you never really think that you can do it until you're there. And the more the coach trusts you and backs you and believes in you and gives you those opportunities, you start to believe more in yourself and have more confidence in yourself. So I just think it's the right time now, from my perspective, to just give these younger blokes an opportunity. And they're actually playing well enough to deserve it too.
But just on that, Will, I think it is wide open. It is a time to give some of these guys an opportunity. Look, one of the criticisms, I think, of the Wallabies under Checker, your last year in 2019 in the World Cup, Ben Darwin, former Wallaby prop, shares on social media a lot. He shares this Excel spreadsheet which charts the changes in the team over time in a colour graph, and it shows a hell of a lot of positional changes, people in and out of the team. Surely this Wallabies team under Rennie needs to pick and stick a bit. Did you think that the Wallabies team, when you were in it, should have picked and sticked a bit more?
Look, it's an interesting one because I've got a lot of respect for Czech and like a lot of love for Czech as well as a coach and as a person. Thing about it is I could understand where he was coming from, because his big thing, I think we touched on it at the top of the show in terms of with Thorne and the halfbacks interchanging. He wanted to build a squad where it didn't matter who was in the jersey. It was literally anyone who stepped in would do the job. And perhaps at different times during the season, he would choose someone else based on the opposition because, that particular player might bring something that would be effective against any given opposition. So, I certainly understood where he's coming from, because and he made that. The thing is, he made that very clear to us as a team early on too. He said it's about a squad effort where I'm going to pick players, put players in and out. We're going to mix and match at times, and I appreciated that, and I was sort of all on board with it as well. But I can see how, from an outside sort of perspective, that chopping and changing can sort of hinder, rhythm and building confidence in combinations and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one. Like I said, I've got a lot of respect for Czech and what he was trying to achieve. So it's sort of hard for me to be critical of it in that sense. Do you know what I mean?
I suppose throwing forward then, you'd like to see him pick and stick a bit more as they bring these young blokes in.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly because they're young blokes. It's because it's different in a World Cup year where you're just going to pick the best 15 regardless of how old they are. That was shown in 2015 when we brought Gitz and Druians back from overseas. I think being at the start of a World Cup cycle, I think it's important to pick and stick with blokes to give them game time, give them time in the saddle to continue to grow their game. Because the only way you get better as a player is when you play at the highest level. You keep playing at the highest level, so you can test yourself, see where you need to improve, go away, improve, and try again until, one day you hopefully become the finished product and you're consistently playing Test rugby. So I certainly would love to see them pick and stick for sure.
Nice. Guys, we're going to have to wrap it up soon, so let's get through these last couple of topics. There's a couple of questions I really want to get with Will. The Trans-Tasman tussle. So the Kiwis came out last week and put out a press release inviting expressions of interest into their Trans-Tasman Pacific competition, which was very nice of them. They said they were looking for 8 to 10 teams, which is a really interesting number, because 8 was where last week I pulled out our bullshit-o-meter when they talked about, saying 2 Australian teams should come in. Australia has 5 teams. Australia is looking for a solution that involves those 5 teams. Will, would you like to see a Trans-Tasman comp? And do you think 5 Australian teams could compete with 5 Kiwi teams?
I'd probably say 4 would be better, because then you allow for more players. You allow for depth and strength within each of those 4 teams. But what I will say is, you've got to have a Trans-Tasman competition where there is that competition between Australia and New Zealand, because New Zealand set the standard in terms of the quality of rugby that they play, but it's just not an attractive brand if they're on their own. The fact that if you play Australia and New Zealand, you get different styles and different brands of rugby, different players coming head to head, which is just more attractive to watch from a spectator's perspective. You can watch the Hurricanes play the Crusaders and the Highlanders play the Chiefs, but if you've seen that all the time, it gets boring. Like it actually does. So you want to see the Highlanders playing the Brumbies because it's two different styles of rugby, which makes it entertaining. So selling the product is so much more attractive if we do it together. And why can't we work together? I don't understand why where it's coming from, where they think they can just expect us to have just the two teams.
I'm sure that there is. I'm sure that there is a bit of argy-bargy at the top there.
Bit of negotiation. Right?
Yeah. There's plenty of negotiation going on, but I mean, how much of it is real? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there would be in the end, like common sense will prevail, and we're definitely stronger together. I think so. I reckon 10-team comp with opportunity for a Japanese team maybe down the track, a Pacifica team as well, wherever that may end up. That sounds like it's the bargaining chip at the moment. Western Sydney, that might be the best place for that, I reckon.
Well, that'll be interesting and something I want to get into on the next couple of shows, that Pacifica team and some of those structures. But I think, Will, your point's exactly right. When you're talking about creating a long-term play here at a viable competition, right? If we know that Super 18 wasn't quite what we wanted, then the chance to build it right is here. And it needs to be large enough, too, to give it some ballast, too. You can't have 5 teams running around and playing each other twice in 8 weeks. Just doesn't do anything, doesn't do any good for the competition. We need the right number of teams over the right period of time, for sure. Look, there's a question.
I think from a player's perspective as well. Oh,
no, please, Will, go.
Well, I think from a player's perspective as well, you want to see like the Tate McDermott's playing against the Aaron Smiths. You want to see the Noahs playing against the Bowden Barretts. So it works from a player's perspective, but also just from the product itself. You want to be seeing different styles of rugby match up against each other. And again, I just think it's a much more attractive product when it's the 10 teams, I think, from both Australia and New Zealand.
Mate, quick question from the crowd. One here for you, Will. A young fella called Morgan Turunui asks, who's the best, most inspirational Sydney boy and Waverley-educated Randwick centre, whoever made him who he is today? And how did you get the nickname Scarecrow at Carl Rackerman's farm in Kingaroy?
That's bringing back some really, really strange old memories that I've completely forgotten about. Thanks, Morgs. I'm sure he's probably referring himself there, right?
I have no doubts.
The thing about Morgs, which I was hoping he was on the show, was the thing I really enjoyed about Morgs. When I first met him, he was the sort of guy that was, always would make sure he took care of the boys. Like he whenever we toured and travelled, make sure that restaurants were booked. We knew the best cafes, knew the places to go after games and things like that. But I remember, like whenever we went to train, whenever we went to work, he always worked hard. He always made sure that he would do his job. And if we were whinging and moaning as younger players, he'd be like, look, just do it. You got to get it done. So I certainly learned a lot off Morgs without taking the piss. He was a good man for me to be around when I was a young fellow at the Reds.
Did you ever get any horse racing tips off him?
No, all I heard about was the way he won like a couple $100,000 or something.
in a team session for the World Cup. Yeah, we had Eddie Jones on talking about that. Well, you've completely punctured the way that we talk about that he eats too much and never trained well, mate. So thanks for that. We always give him heaps on the podcast, and you've just smashed it. Look, let's just finish off, guys. I know we thank you for your time. Rule changes. I just want to talk here briefly. A couple of things. I mentioned Eddie Jones a second ago. Eddie Jones was on the Ruckus podcast with us a couple of weeks back, maybe a month or two ago, and he talked about he wanted to see less substitutions in the game. He wanted to see less players on the bench and less people coming into the game and more fatigue. For a bloke like yourself, Will, a sharp halfback who uses their pace a bit, a more fatiguing game is surely something desirable. What do you think of that idea of less substitutions in a game of footy?
Mate, I love it. I love the idea of it because then it brings into the game skill. Because a lot of the time, say for example, you look at the big teams, whether it's South Africa or other temes, they've got 8 big boppers on the field with however many subs. They can go as hard as they can for 50 minutes, and you bring however many subs on for the last 30 minutes. It certainly plays into their team's favours in terms of being tactical with substitutions. Whereas I think if you reduce that, you actually bring out the skill level in players because you've got to play under fatigue. You've got to make decisions under fatigue. And it just opens the game up a little bit more to be more entertaining as well, because under fatigue, more tries will be scored. There'll be more space on the field to play with, which then provides for a more attractive, entertaining game of rugby. So that's something that I'd certainly be all for sure.
What about these other rule changes, mate? You like the 50-22?
I love it. The reason I love it is because for so long in Australian rugby, we've been critical of like our kickers and not being good tactical kickers. So the fact that we brought this rule change in allows us to practice those things, practice looking for corners, but with the reward of getting the ball back. And I think over the time of the competition, what you'll find is we'll get better at when to kick and when not to kick. Because at the moment, say, for example, you drop your two wingers back to cover that, there should be running space on the edge. You should then take advantage of that by running the ball. But if they all come up, then you're looking to take that space. So I think the more we play under these rule changes, and I actually really, really like that one, the better we'll get at reading where space is and then executing, whether it is to run to that space or take the 50-20.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that as well. I like the fact that when you get a 50-22, a team gets to continue their attack, and you're not watching a team having to exit from their half again, and it ends up being a game of foursome backs. You get to keep attacking as well.
Guys, look, we're going to wrap it up. Just two more things for you, Will. Firstly, you dodged the question from Morgan on how you got the nickname Scarecrow. Is that something you can address or not, bud?
I actually can't remember. I think we were out in the farm doing like work, like fencing and stuff like that. And I'm an Islander boy. I got no idea how to do that sort of stuff. And I think I was just standing there doing nothing, and I got the name Scarecrow while everybody else was working.
Fair enough. But the last thing I want to touch with you before you go is I hear you've been doing a bit of coaching too. You've been working with a few players. Is that something you're trying to get into?
Mate, I absolutely love it. It's an interesting one for me at the moment. It gives me a sense of joy that probably playing doesn't anymore at the moment. Like, obviously I love playing. I get, you love playing well, you love winning games and things like that. But the fact that you're helping young kids and helping them improve and get better, when you see that come to fruition in training or in games, I think for me it's really special. And I've been lucky enough to have been working with Tate for the last 2 months, leading up to when Super Rugby started, just working on things to do with his passing, and a little bit around, I guess, his mindset around what we were speaking about in terms of as a halfback being ruthless and demanding what it is that you want because you touch the ball the most out of everyone on the field. So yeah, I've absolutely loved it, and I'm certainly keen to do a little bit more.
Mate, if you're pointing to players around the world, who's got the best pass in the world that you'd tell the young blokes to watch?
You'd have to say Aaron Smith.
Yeah,
pretty
crisp, isn't it? It's crisp to watch.
Yeah,
nice.
It's very crisp, very crisp.
Excellent. Look, guys, that'll wrap us up for the day. Will, fantastic to have you on, buddy. The other thing I was wondering is how come we aren't seeing any Instagram posts of you doing out of the back of the hand 50-metre passes across the park, mate, like Quade? I know you're training with Quade. Where are your videos on Insta, mate?
You want it? Mate, the
Not
reason
get
is
one?
I just can't do them. I'm boring, mate. I just do the basics.
Nice. Well, Will, look, we wish you all the best, mate. We hope you can get back on the footy field soon. Giddo's Law, will we see you back one day, play for the Wallabies?
Mate, I'd love to be back playing Super Rugby. I don't know about playing for Australia. I think that's well and truly been put to bed. But no, I'd love to come back at some point and play Super Rugby. I've got so much time off, so you never know. Maybe give me a couple of months to give it a go.
There we go. Thanks, Will. Thank you, Swaney. Good to see you again, bud.
Good on you guys. Great to see you.
That was the Tight Five on Rugby Ruckus.
Awesome.
We're here every week live.
Thank you so much.
We'll catch you next week.